Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Welwyn Hatfield's Council's Youth Question Time for 2020. My name is Russell Cairns. I am the Youth Work Team Leader for YCH Services for Young People, which is part of Hertfordshire County Council. It was formerly YC Hertfordshire, in case any of you know it by that name. I'm fortunate enough today to be chairing this event alongside Hannah from Welwyn Hatfield Youth Council.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm the Vice Chair of Welwyn Hatfield Youth Council. The Welwyn Hatfield Youth Council is a group of 11 to 19-year-olds from Welwyn Hatfield who discuss and take action on issues that affect young people. One of our priorities as Youth Council is equality, and we believe that young people's voices should be heard just as much as people in positions of power. No one understands issues young people face quite as we do as young people. That's why today's event is so important to us.
Thank you, Hannah. So just want to thank everybody, first of all, for attending today's event. I'm just going to, in a minute or two, hand over to our panel members who will introduce themselves before we start to ask them some, hopefully some interesting questions. In the meantime, however, you can start to submit questions live. So as you can now see on the screen, you can submit your questions by going to slido.com. You must go to it on a different browser tab, and you must enter the code that you see there. Alternatively, you may scan the QR code with your mobile phone and use Slido from your phone, of course. And you can see that there on the screen just now, hopefully, yes. You won't be asked to download any app for this process at all, so please rest assured on that. However, each time you would like to submit a question, you need to go to the other browser tab with Slido and enter your next question and click enter, okay? You must be aware, though, unfortunately, that because of the volume of questions we may receive, we won't probably be able to ask our panelists every question today, but we will try and answer as many of your questions as possible. So please submit your questions anonymously as well, and you can start right away. So on you go. Whilst you're having a think about that and doing that, it's time for me to hand over to our panel members. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, as well as tell you a little bit about themselves and the topics that they've got expertise in and that they'll cover, just to give you a rough idea of what you might like to ask them. So if it's okay, I'm going to go on to the first panel member, who is to introduce themselves, please. And that's Guy Foxell, the One YMCA Chief Executive.
Hello there, everybody. As Russell says, my name's Guy, and I've been in the role at YMCA for about a decade, but before that I spent about 15 years as a youth worker, so it's very much at the core of who I am and what I like doing. YMCA as an organisation covers hearts, beds and bucks. We do a lot of work in Welwyn Hatfield. Hopefully some of you watching will know some of our youth workers, And it's going to be my role in particular to ask questions perhaps around the trends that young people are telling us about, how they're feeling during lockdown, maybe their prospects for the future, but also because of some of the work that WIMES does, I'll be really pleased to ask questions about perhaps broader family issues, and also homelessness being key issues. So hopefully a bit of a mixture, but I've got some good facts and stats of what young people in Welwyn Hatfield are telling us and how that fits with the wider picture, particularly on a national basis of how young people are approaching this difficult time we're going through. So very happy to answer questions on those topics.
Thank you, Guy, and welcome to the event. And thank you for being part of our panel. The next panellist I would like to introduce is Councillor Tony Kingsbury.
Hello there, Russell. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Tony Kingsbury. I'm leader of Welwyn Hatfield Borough Council. I've been leader for a couple of years and a councillor for 11 years now. So I'm really here. I'm happy to take any questions that relate to what the Borough Council does or the role of a councillor. You know, things about town centres, housing in the borough, the environment, sort of anything you'd like to pose to me along those sort of lines. So really looking forward to the questions and what we all have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kingsbury, and I'm sure we'll have some interesting questions for you throughout the afternoon. The next panellist I'd like to introduce is Joe Fisher, who's the Operations Director for Children and Young People Services in Hertfordshire County Council. Joe.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for having me this evening. As Russell said, I'm Jo Fisher. I am the Operations Director for Children and Young People. And what that means is that I have specific responsibility for a range of services to do with youth and young people, but also family support, making sure that we get help to families who might need it as early as we can. That can include anything from helping families into work, dealing with homelessness or general parenting issues and support that they might have. So a whole range of things. I've also got responsibility for services for children with special educational needs and disabilities. So again, happy to take any specific questions on those sorts of issues or more broadly questions about what the council's doing at this time and the sort of things that you might be interested in. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. A vast array of stuff there for people to get their teeth into. Thank you. And welcome. Okay, the next panellist I'd like to introduce, please, is Sue Beck, who is Head of Children's and Young People Services in Public Health of the Hertfordshire County Council. Over to you, Sue.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. As Russell said, my name's Sue. I too used to be a youth worker and had worked in Welwyn Hatfield as well many years ago. In terms of my job currently, I look at and I'm concerned about sort of health issues that relate to all young people, right from the age of 0 up until young adults. So I cover all sorts of different issues such as healthy eating, physical activity. Probably a health issue that's of particular concern to you at the moment perhaps is around mental health and emotional well-being of young people, and I'm also very involved in terms of what's happening with COVID, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you and welcome to the event, Sue. Okay, our penultimate panellist is from the police, so the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire, David Lloyd.
Hi there, yes, I'm David Lloyd. I'm not quite from the police, actually. I'm a police and crime commissioner, so I'm an elected politician. And my role is to make sure that I represent people's views from across Hertfordshire with regard to community safety and criminal justice. And I'm quite passionate about both of those things. I'm really, a politician's role basically is always to set a plan for what we want to do, set a budget around how we're going to do it, you know, how we're going to buy the right things to do it with, hold people to account in making sure that budgets and that plan are delivered, and putting in charge people who are gifted enough to be able to do it. So, you know, I employ the person who's called the Chief Constable, who's in charge of all the police officers, including Simon, who you'll hear from in a moment. but I'm not in charge of Simon. That's someone else's job. My areas of expertise and the things that I love talking about are what sort of place do we want to live in? What sort of society do we want? What sort of criminal justice system do we want? And that then sort of goes into fairness quite often, and diversity, and those things, Hannah, that you were talking about around equality, and how we make sure all that happens across Hertfordshire. So I'll be really happy to get into those. I'll be happy to get into those questions. Of course, there's no simple answer to them, but I'll be really interested in your views.
Thank you, and welcome to the event, David. And I'm sure there will be some questions that you'll be able to contribute to this afternoon during the event. Okay, and lastly, as you alluded to there, our last panelist, but certainly by no means least, is the Chief Inspector, Simon Mason. Simon, over to you.
Hatfield, my name is Simon Mason. I've been with Constabulary for about 21 years now in a variety of roles across the county. I've been in Hatfield for about 18 months now, and as you've alluded to, I'm really here to speak about local policing, any operational policing matters that wish to be discussed, and community safety.
That's great. Thank you, Simon, and welcome to today's event as well. And again, I'm sure we'll have some localized questions for yourself as well. So welcome to all our panelists. We're going to get going in a couple of moments or so.
Thank you. Now it's time to answer some of your questions. Throughout the event, please continue to send any questions you may have which affect us as young people. It is anonymous, so please don't be afraid to ask anything. If you have any questions about Slido or a technical issue, please send it over in the same way and we'll try to support you.
Okay, folks, we're going to kick off if that's okay, if everybody's ready. So the very first question, we've got a few here. Okay, the very first question is, what is being done to help road safety outside of schools? So I'll repeat that. What is being done to help road safety outside of schools? I guess there's a variety of panelists I could possibly ask that question to. I wonder if we could maybe start though with Councillor Kingsbury, if that's possible, please.
Of course, and it's a very important question. I think a lot of this actually comes down to the County Council and perhaps to some extent David Lloyd as the PCC in terms of some of the measures that are being put in. And I know there's some bids for various work as well, but certainly as a councillor, we often get things raised about road safety and safety around schools. So I think perhaps, I don't want to put it on to David, but David might have some more to say on this.
Yes, not at all. Should we go over, David? Would you like to respond to that, please?
In the trade, when I used to play rugby, that was called a hospital pass. And basically what that is the moment when you can see someone big running up against you and you pass the ball out like that. And it was always me who got those passes to me. And I've done it again. So thanks very much, Tony. That was kind. What I would say is there are 2 or 3 elements to this. First of all, we have all got a duty around safety outside schools. So actually, the reason that roads outside schools are not safe is normally because people are being picked up. Either students themselves have driven in and out and are in that area, or parents are picking up outside and are not paying attention to everything. So actually, there is something about how we ensure that we behave appropriately outside schools, and actually that pedestrians also behave appropriately and aren't falling into the roads and doing all those sorts of things. So we've all got a duty there, and if everyone did their part, there would be no reason to do anything else, but we will do something else as well. So that's the first bit, which is important. The County Council, of course, has a duty to have safe routes to schools and to have plans around each school, so that people aren't all congregating in one area right outside the school gates, but actually they're slightly further away, which reduces the risk. And the other thing, of course, that we're doing is in liaison with the county council, outside the schools, you can get some very, very good markers and campaigns. In places like Broxbourne, we've had some brilliant campaigns where people are reminded of their necessity to take care and be careful. Some borough councils use their traffic wardens to actually go outside the schools as well. And so Tony can make sure that the traffic wardens are outside schools where there's a problem, so that they can enforce. And sometimes, and Simon might come back on that, police officers might also go there if there's a real concern about speeds that people are going outside or problem behaviour out there. So I think that broadly covers what we're doing.
Safety, road safety is a really, really important issue for every community in Hertfordshire. And I know young people, particularly being a youth worker myself, I know they do worry about it. They don't always say it, but they do worry about it. So thank you for that. If it's okay with the panel, I'm going to move on to the next question. So the next question is it likely that a large enough proportion of the population needed to achieve herd immunity will be vaccinated against COVID-19 despite being against it? I think we'll put this question first of all to Sue, if that's okay. Sue.
Sorry, I have to keep remembering to unmute myself on these questions, so bear with me, everybody. What I would say is that nobody's going to be forced to have any immunisation, so it's always an individual's decision. Clearly, the government has done a huge amount of research and is doing a huge amount of research in terms of having safe vaccination in place, and we won't be rolling out anything unless that has been confirmed. There's all sorts of work that happens clinically before any vaccination would be introduced to the public. There is something called herd immunity, which some people, both on this panel, will be familiar with, and some of the young people listening. In essence, what that means is that there needs to be a sufficient number of people who have had the vaccination to ensure that everybody is safe. So hopefully that will answer the question.
Would any further panel like to comment on that question?
If I come in, I mean, I think there is an issue about, there's an assumption that we will find a vaccine. I hope that assumption is right. So that's the first stage you've got to get through. Clearly, there's quite a lot of selling to do then to make sure that people take vaccines, receive the vaccine. It really is important to do so. And we know that we've had problems, for instance, with measles, mumps and rubella, where there was a lot of false news around what the impact of vaccines were. And with that false news, what tends to happen is people say, oh, it's too dangerous to use, and then you don't build up that herd immunity. So it's a really good question, because there's a real danger that even if we get the vaccine, people will start to say, oh, we shouldn't be vaccinated against it. So it will be a real issue.
Thank you. Would any of our other panelists like to comment on that question? Okay. Thank you for your answers, panel. I know certainly in my experience of working with young people that, you know, COVID-19 has been a massive issue for them, and there's been lots of, you know, mental health and well-being issues with it. There is lots of support out there for young people, and you can get lots of more information on various council websites, including the County Council's website. So please, young people, you know, take the opportunity to get that advice and support if you need it. Okay, we're going to move on to our next question now. And our next question it's up on your screen there. What is being done to make people in the LGBT+ community feel safe on the streets. So that's what is being done to make people in the LGBTQ plus community feel safe on our streets. I wonder if we could start by maybe taking a local perspective, and wonder if Chief Inspector Simon Mason could maybe comment on that, please.
Of course. Obviously, most importantly, the police are here as part of the community and to work with the community, and that includes us identifying and liaising with local community groups across a wide range of protected characteristics. This will obviously include the LGBTQ community. So some of the ways we do that is by having something called key individual networks. So we identify people within these communities to act as a voice effectively for that community and assist us in understanding problems that may or may not be faced within the community themselves to ensure our policing response is appropriate. The question itself almost alludes to a bit of hate crime there. And of course, any hate crime we would take completely seriously and deal with appropriately, efficiently and promptly. But this fundamentally is about engaging with the community, understanding their needs and the problems they may or may not be facing, and working to address those.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. I don't know if David, if you want to comment on that a little bit, perhaps.
It does go very much to the heart of what's so important to me about making sure we have a really fair community. I've been really, the last 8 years as Police and Crime Commissioner, one of the things that I've been really pleased at is that our police force is a diverse police force where gay people get to the very top in terms of being the leading officers. And I think that's important, not because of needing to have a certain proportion of any type of person in any position, but actually because with the proper diversity in leadership, you get better decisions. And also, and I think perhaps even more crucial, all people who wish to report a crime against them need to know that their crime is going to be taken seriously. And for that to be the case, they need to know that that there are people like them within the police as well. And we have a diverse police force. We're still not where I would want it to be in terms of ethnicity, but it certainly is in a really good place around gender balance. It's in a really good place in terms of LGBTQ plus. So, I think that that is really important. That then spills out onto what happens on the street. And I think it's actually, again, it's about what we all do. So you need to call out a crime when you see one. You need to report in a crime when you see one. If someone is, you see someone taking part in a hate crime, that needs to be called out. That's our responsibility to the community, to actually say, this isn't the sort of place we want to live. We want a place to live where, there's fairness for all and equality for all. So, that is really important. That's how you can help yourselves, just by calling it out, by calling the police, by referring to social workers, by referring to youth workers, by referring to teachers. That's how you can call it out, and you need to do it because you can report it through that way, and we will take action.
Thank you, David. And I think the message was very, very clear there from both yourself and Simon that, if there is issues with it, they need to be reported. Otherwise, you can't do lots with it. So thank you for that. And those of you watching, obviously, please take that advice on board. We're going to go on, I think, now to the next question, if that's okay. So the next question says, throughout lockdown, there was an increase in young people witnessing domestic abuse at home. What is being done to support these young people and families? So this is a question about lockdown and an increase, witnessing increase in young people witnessing domestic abuse at home. and just what support is there for the young people and families. I wonder if we could go to Joe, please. Joe Fisher.
Hi, thank you very much. Again, a really important question, and you're absolutely right. We have indeed seen an increase in families and young people experiencing and witnessing domestic abuse, not only across Hertfordshire, but across the country, a really important issue to flag. There's a huge range of support out there. I think for young people, the most important thing is that you know who to get in touch with, and you do it quickly. We've got a range of support services out there. You can get in touch with the council, you can get in touch with somebody in your school or a trusted individual. We know from talking to young people that actually lots of you prefer to tell somebody that you trust, somebody already in your network of people. And that's fine, because if you do that, they will know how to get help in. We have stepped up all of our frontline social work services and services for young people during this pandemic. We know that there's an increase in the heightened sense of vulnerability and risk out there. And we really are reaching out to make sure that people know how to get hold of us. On my screen, I think someone's just shared the sort of Chat Health, Just Talk and Couth. These are the sort of online and other ways of just getting help. You can go into the websites or you can text Chat Health to get some confidential support and advice. So, you know, we would encourage you to make use of these helplines. You can access them from YouTube now as you're looking at them, but also you can go on to either the council websites or you know, Just Talk Hearts or couth.com in order to get help, and we'd encourage you to do that.
That's great, Joe. Thank you very much for that. Real significant issue for young people and families. I would agree with you recently. Just wonder if Guy from 1YMCA, if you would like to comment any further on that question.
I think I would agree with everything that Jo is saying, and she's quite right. The increase is really concerning. You may have seen some of the posters that are around about the place which says domestic abusers work from home, and you know that is the real difficulty of this. But I think Jo is spot on. There are places to go to talk to people about that help. We have a number of our youth workers who are trained to be able to support people in that. But I think the key thing is to talk about it and do that with people you trust, which has been flagged. But I think everyone is recognizing that the challenges of lockdown mean that we're all in each other's hair more. It is more difficult to go out. We're not even allowed to go out. So that increase is something which I hope we're not going to see spiraling out of control at all. But it is a real concern, and it's great to see so many people on this call who are in positions where they can make decisions where actually more support can be offered as lockdown continues. So I think it's going to be one of those conversations which just increases in terms of those who are trying to work out where the support is needed most will be able to take that forward. So you've got the right people on this call, and it's great to hear them talk about ways young people can be supported.
Brilliant, thank you, Guy. Okay, folks, we're going to move on to the next question now, if that's okay. And the next question is, what is being done to ensure the town centres will still be open when we are older? For example, getting young people to use shops by reducing rent and free parking to access them. I'll just repeat that. What is being done to ensure the town centres will still be open when we are older? For example, getting people to use shops by reducing rent and free parking to access them. I think for this question, it might be quite useful to go to Councillor Kingsbury first, if that's okay.
Of course, thank you very much. There's actually quite a lot being done on this. If I go through Welwyn Hatfield and look at Hatfield Town Centre, we actually own most of that, and over the last few years we've been doing an awful lot of development there to bring in, and most of the shops are full. We've got plans with a multi-storey car park there to build more housing around it, which will make it bring people in towards the town centre, and we're doing more and more to try and increase footfall there, including events in the town centre. Similarly, in Welwyn Garden City, which we don't own so much of, so not so much in terms of the development of the shops and things itself, but we've worked with the BID in terms of some schemes there. Recently, in terms of car parks, not free car parking, but we've got a voucher scheme to encourage people in while we've been in the sort of COVID position. I know we're going back down again, but trying to encourage footfall over the last few months. And again, there we've got development plans which will bring people more into the town centre. And as the town centres evolve, it's more of a mixture of retail and people in those town centres. And if you've got people living there, they tend to go in and use the town centres a bit more as well. We always have to judge in terms of the price of the car parks and any rents for any of the buildings we own. But I think it's about getting the right mix. But we do really want to make them thrive. And we've also got partnerships that look at the way it may go forward in the future and how we grow those town centres in perhaps a different way, but making them still very vibrant for young people and for everyone to use in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Kingsbury. And I think, you know, that the fact young people have asked that clearly shows that, you know, they are concerned, they want to know about their future. Town centres are for, as you correctly pointed out, they're there for the whole community, including young people. So it is important that they are vibrant, obviously, and they're suitable for communities. Could I ask if any further panel would wish to comment on that question, please? No? Okay, not a problem. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to the next question, if that's okay with the panel and everybody else. So the next question is, should the voting age be lowered to 16 so young people have more of a voice? Interesting question. Should the voting age be lowered to 16 so that young people have more of a voice? Yeah, big question. I'm sure we've all got views on that. Let's start by going to Joe.
Thank you, Russell. I think I'm unmuted. I was smiling as I read that question, thinking, you know, what I can say very clearly is that making sure that we hear the voice of young people is really important. It's got to be at the forefront of everything we do, and it's something we take in the council, we take really seriously. I'm probably not the person to comment on whether, you know, we should be reducing the voting age of young people, but I do think it's important, regardless of that we've got structures and ways of making sure that young people not only have a voice, that they have an influence, and it really impacts on how we not just develop services, but policies. Youth parliaments, forums like this, they're all really, really important ways of making sure you hold people like me to account and you have a real impact on how we take things moving forward. So yes, I think it's really important that young people have a voice. Yes, I think we need to take very seriously that we've got the right structures in place to enable that, and that's our responsibility to work with you to enable that. The question about whether we should actually reduce the voting age politically, I'm going to leave to some other people on this group to answer. Thank you.
That was well dodged, Joe. Yeah, but I think ultimately the point you're making is that it's really important that young people can get access to influence decisions and local things for themselves and local communities. So absolutely agree with you there. I just wonder, obviously, organisation working, you know, specifically with young people as well, if maybe Guy from 1YMCA wants to comment on that question as well.
Yes, thank you, Russell. And I'm probably in a position to be able to say more than Joe can. My own particular take is that, yes, absolutely. Young people are often seen as, oh, they're the future of the town or the future of the county or the future of the country. I dispute that. Of course they are, but they're also the present. And I think we are in a situation where 16 and 17-year-olds are more informed about global issues than they have ever been. They are the generation that is going to help us solve the issues of equality across the globe, of environmental impact across the globe, of fake news across the globe. They're going to be that generation which do that. Many of the people watching will be in positions where they are going to change the course of history. Therefore, these guys, I think, the ones we need to get their input as early as possible. And I really think it would be a huge wake-up call for all of us in decision-making positions, all of those who are in political arenas as well. And yeah, my take is, what's the worst that can happen? I'm sure some of the politicians will tell us what the worst that could happen is, but genuinely, I think this would be an incredible move that would shift the position for saying, hey, those young people, won't they be great? Few years time, they'll be able to make sensible decisions then. I believe that when you give a young person the information they need, and then you treat them with the respect to say, over to you, here's your responsibility, I've always seen that they step up to that responsibility and take that choice very, very seriously. So from me, it would be a firm yes.
Thank you, Guy. I wonder if, just before we move on with that question, I know I know a lot of young people feel very passionately about it. I just wonder if we could get a view from Councillor Kingsbury, if that's possible, please.
I've got a certain amount of support for it. I agree. I think the most important thing, I agree with Joe, is that we listen to what young people say. I mean, I'm very proud of the youth council we've got at Welwyn Hatfield and what young people feed into us, and that's important that we listen to them. And if anyone ever comes to me or the youth council ever want to meet up, that's really, really important to listen, as you said, what the future is, but also what the present is of young people at the moment. So I'm dodging it slightly, but it sounds sort of positive in lots of ways.
Thank you, Councillor Kingsbury. I think to be fair, I think what we're all unanimously saying here, or what our panellists seem to unanimously be saying, is it's really important that young people are involved in decision making and have access to that and be empowered to be able to do that. And you're absolutely right. This is the whole point of this event today, is to get young people's views and opinions on board, and actually speaking to decision makers like our panellists here today. So yeah, it's a good question. Okay, I think we're going to move on with the event now to the next question, if that's what
I was going to come in because I've got a direct interest, of course, because I've got an election in May, and I suspect many of the people I'm talking to won't have a vote, so it is interesting. I think through the 19th century, a lot of time was spent giving more and more people votes. At the beginning of the 19th century, really, you only had a very few people, a very limited number of people who had the right to vote. And normally it was around whether or not you owned property and were male. Through the 19th century and then into the early 20th century, the big issue around the early 20th century was increasing the number of people, doubling the number of people who could vote, because women were offered the opportunity to vote, and then also reducing the age. I think it was 25 then to 21, and it came down from 21 to 18. And I suspect that at every stage, people have said, oh, we're not quite old enough at that age to vote. And what I don't know is how we why we decide people are old enough or not to vote, because maturity is different in different people. Some people probably aren't old enough to vote at 25 in terms of how they have developed their thinking. Some people aren't old enough at 55, but there are probably many 14-year-olds who have very, very sophisticated thoughts. So I suppose the point I'd make is, in some ways, voting isn't the only thing that you need to get involved with, and in many ways, of course, you have all the democratic rights that everyone else has of holding to account and questioning me, questioning Tony, doing those things. You've also got the right to get involved, and people do get involved in political parties. You've got the right to influence, and also the biggest right you've got is that you can buy things. So you can get involved in the market, so you can decide what things are up and what things are down. So that dodges the question in saying the vote isn't the most important thing, but I think that it's good to recognise what already we do. And I think that we should have a discussion about it. And the place, of course, the discussion is you need to engage with your parliamentarians. So if you're living in Welwyn Hatfield area, it's Grant Shapps is your MP. if you're a little bit further north, it may well be that it's Stephen McPartland, or further to the east, it might be Charles Walker. But, you know, get involved with your local MPs and actually start having that discussion, because they'll be really interested in it. And it isn't an unreasonable discussion. There is a bit of evidence, though, that people at younger ages tend to be more conservative, more cautious rather than conservative in their voting. And it's quite surprising how that happens, and that actually it's almost not until the young people leave home and perhaps go off to university or whatever that they get more radical in their thinking. So if that's the case, I'm really delighted to suggest that you should all have a vote at 16, because I'm hoping that you'll be cautious enough to think that I was the sort of person to vote for. So yes, that would be brilliant.
Thank you, David. And I think that was good advice there about if young people do want to obviously have that debate about contacting their local politicians. So you heard it from David here, folks. So please, if you want to do that, that's good advice. Can I just check, folks, before we move on to the next question, if any of the panel would like to comment on that specific question we've just had any further? No? Okay. Thank you for your contributions to that question, panelists. We're going to move on to the next question, which is, what are the police doing to ensure children are safe travelling to and from school? So that's, what are the police doing to ensure children are safe travelling to and from school? I wonder if we could go to Chief Inspector Simon Mason for a local perspective first, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, it's a bit of a difficult question, Russell, because it's quite an expansive topic, really. There. So I think what I'd say is, generally, we would be really, really conscious about this if there was a specific issue. So if there was a specific incident that we were affecting people travelling generally at a specific time of the day, or specifically affecting a location, then our patrols would be in place to reassure that community, including children and their parents, of course, that are going to and from school. I think generally that's where we'd come in relation to that. Just in terms of children generally travelling to school, it's not something really that, unless it encompassed a specific issue or some informational intelligence around a problem, that we'd specifically target. And that's fundamentally because I think we've got the understanding that generally in all of our communities, we live in a very, very safe county, and people would be able to travel to school unless there was something going on completely safely without any fear.
Yes, indeed, Simon. Thank you for that. I just wonder if, David, if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I suppose the thing that often people do when they're in this sort of forum, they're answering questions, is to question the question first of all. So in some ways, I don't think the responsibility for travelling to and from school safely is the responsibility of the police, but the police clearly have a role around it in terms of helping it. The primary responsibility is our own responsibility as we're going backwards and forwards to make sure that we're doing things and the practices that we're undertaking are safe. And there are various ways of getting to school. Some people might be getting on a school bus, and the county council makes sure that the buses are properly inspected. I seem to remember at one point there was a place where school buses were being pulled over on a number of occasions because they kept going through a red light. So you know, we make sure that those buses are safe in terms of what sort of buses they are, that the drivers have not got criminal records, which would bring us concern, and that they act appropriately. Clearly, there are roads policing patrols which ensure that people going in cars, you know, if they're doing something which they shouldn't be doing, are likely to be pulled over, and there are speed cameras and whatever around that. And we've talked at the beginning about what we're doing around the edges of schools. people who are walking to and from schools. I mean, there are issues around, is there bullying happening? Are there things happening outside gates, which are the responsibility both of the school community itself, and they will monitor that. And again, the police will get involved if there is a need to be involved, but very often it's the school which will do that. And most of all, I encourage you all to make sure that your practices are safe in what you're doing, and that you are ensuring that people know where you're going, and that people know when you're getting home and how you're getting home, so that we're all looking out for each other.
Thank you, David. And I certainly think you're right about safe practices in terms of getting to school. I think it is everybody's responsibility, not just the police. Obviously, the question was specifically about the police. And Chief Inspector Simon Mason, I think your comments about if you know there are specific issues just raises the issue of saying to young people, if you do know there are specific issues and troubles in getting to school, raise it with someone, whether it's a teacher, social worker, youth worker, parent, whoever. Really important that young people do that, so we can get those issues and problems sorted. I think we're going to move on next, if that's okay. So slightly different question this time, a different topic. The next question is, what can be done to help young carers who will not get support sessions due to the lockdown? So that's what can be done to help young carers who will not get support sessions due to the lockdown. Of course, the lockdown starts tomorrow. I wonder if we start this question with Joel.
Thank you, Russell. Very happy to answer this question. It really is important that we make sure we are getting support to our young carers. They do a great job, and we need to continue to give them all the support they need and they deserve. We are through YC Hearts, as you know, Russell, but also other services, running a huge amount of our services online. So group work, the type of stuff we do with young carers at the moment, just because we can't pull you all together into a room indoors and do that sort of activity, we can and are doing those sessions online. I know that YC Hearts, and Russell will know much more about this than me, but I know that YC Hearts have been doing numerous online sessions, group work sessions during lockdown throughout this whole period since April, ranging from people's emotional well-being and how you feel about yourself and issues of confidence, right through to sort of specific issues that people are interested in. So have a look at the YC Hearts website, see what group sessions are going out. Our youth workers should be in contact with you, talking about how we're going to keep our services running online. In terms of individual support that young people might need, where people still need one-to-one, face-to-face sessions, we are still doing that. Our social workers are still doing individual casework. They're meeting people, at their homes, sometimes through on the front door, keeping that social distancing right. But we are still doing those sessions. We're meeting people outside. And I think it's really important that young carers feel that they are getting the help they need. If any of you are listening to this and you don't know how to get help, you need to contact us and let us know. Your social worker or your youth worker should be able to advise you, but otherwise look at the YC Hearts website and get in touch with us through that route. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, indeed. Young carers are really important, as young people, of course, all young people are during a lockdown period. And as you quite rightly say, YCH Services for Young People does have lots and lots of online sessions that young people get involved in, and we'd encourage them to do that through the website. I just wondered if we could go to Guy, who might want to comment on that a little bit further.
Yeah, thank you, Russell. I guess we work with around about 20,000 young people every year in this patch, and I'll make a few comments that I think aren't specific to young carers, but maybe give a broader picture. So apologies if that's a slight divergence from the question. But it's interesting, in the surveys that we've been doing, national ones conducted very recently by the Children's Society, that actually young people's view of family and that what they're experiencing at home in the main is very, very positive. While we see the approach and the view of life in general and friends is actually going down a bit. People's view of that, young people's view of that is deteriorating. Actually, within family, they're giving really, really strong feedback. So I think that's really quite encouraging, particularly at a time when we're facing the worst youth unemployment for 40 years. And there is that sense of, I believe, around about 20%, that's 1 in 5 of employed young people who were furloughed have now lost their job during redundancy because of this lockdown approach. So we're at a time when actually you'd expect young people's morale to be really low, but instead we're seeing right now they are still quite buoyant. We're even hearing people talking about being very much raring to go and to get back into things once lockdown is even ready to get back into education. So there's a huge amount of positivity there. But as others have talked about, and I think this will apply to young carers who, as we know, have to face an awful lot already, but a number of young people are reflecting that while it's okay now, it's looking like it's going to be another challenging month. And actually that sense of self, that sense of well-being is likely to deteriorate. Sadly, the UK has already kind of has the worst scores for life satisfaction for young people in Europe. And that's kind of where we've always been. But actually what I think the concern is that during this time of potentially greater isolation, without the access to as much face-to-face support as they have been used to, that many of our young people may find that they just get more and more down. And one of our future questions may be about mental health, but it is worth flagging that this is going to be something that's going to be hitting everyone. The adults on screen in front of those that you know in your family. It's a tough time. And the ways that we have normally used to lift ourselves up, to keep ourselves fit in body, mind and spirit are becoming harder and harder for us to deliver. But right now, the young people that YMCA is in contact with, and certainly the picture nationally, is that young people are telling us they feel happy about home, friends and health. They tell us they are doing fine in the way that they're looking at things. But actually, as we're hearing, my sense is that for young people in general, but particularly for young carers, this is going to be another really tough month. And I think we're looking for all of us to look out for another. There's an awful lot that you can do with using the mobile phone, staying in touch, all of the digital stuff that young people are so good at. My encouragement is reach out to your friends, particularly the ones you know are difficult. Message them, how are you doing? Let's chat, let's FaceTime, let's whatever it is. This is one of those scenarios, yeah, we can look to public health, we can look to the politicians, we can look to the NHS, we can look to the police, but actually we've got to look in the mirror and say, how can we be part of supporting those that we know? And if we're in difficulty ourselves, how do we pick up the phone, send the message which says, I need to chat to someone? So a bit like PCC, David has said, it's all of our responsibility in this. But my encouragement is right now, young people are still saying, yeah, we've got this, we can do this. So that from me.
And I'm sure all young people are going to, like all communities, will find the looming lockdown very, very challenging. But as you correctly said, young carers are particularly vulnerable to it, and making sure they get the support that they need and deserve is really, really important from a range of organisations out there, including One YMCA and YCH Services for Young People. If it's okay, folks, we're going to move on to the next question. Which is another interesting one. I'll read it out to you. Due to the wearing of face masks, children who need social cues in school, such as facial expressions, are put at a disadvantage. How can we make their lives easier? So this is a question about the wearing of face coverings, and children who do need social cues in school, such as facial expressions, feel they're at a disadvantage. How can we make their lives easier? I wonder if it's possible maybe first to go to Sue Beck on this, please, just from a public health perspective, because obviously wearing a face mask, cues and stuff, it can affect health and so forth, can't it?
It's a brilliant question. I think one that's quite topical, and I know does worry some people at the moment. So I think there's probably going to be a number of us that want to kind of contribute to that, to give a kind of holistic answer. So I think everybody recognises, for those young people and children, that they need those social cues, that this situation makes it more challenging. I think in schools at the moment, the guidance is very clear that it is around communal areas, that actually when children and young people are in class, teachers don't need to wear masks, as long as obviously they're following all the rules, which obviously they all are, to enable some of those barriers and challenges to be overcome. I don't know, Joe, in terms of children from a sort of SEND perspective, and that might be where the question is thinking about particularly those children in SEND and what your thoughts might be. But clearly, in terms of what is needed on both sides, in terms of keeping everybody safe, but also helping those children and young people to communicate and to learn effectively, is what we constantly are weighing up as professionals.
Yeah, there's a balance. Joe, please respond.
Sorry. Yeah, no, thanks, Sue. And I agree, and you're absolutely right. I mean, whilst lots of schools are asking teachers and pupils to wear face masks, obviously in shared areas, they don't actually need to be worn in the classroom for teaching. However, I think communication, as you said, Sue, is absolutely critical. And for some young people, particularly young people that I work with and my teams work with, it's really important that we think through what their particular needs are, and that they can, be able to read the facial expressions very, very clearly if they need those sorts of prompts for communication. We are working really closely with our schools to think through these issues. We've issued some very clear guidance to schools around how to communicate. If a teacher, for whatever reason, is going to be wearing a mask in the lesson, they can wear the types of masks that you can see through. And so that people can still see their eyes, still see their face, still lip read if that's what they need to do, just to have that clear view of the teacher. So we're prompting schools and making sure they know how to access that type of equipment. What I would say is if anyone is still struggling in school to be able to learn and communicate because of the sorts of the use of face masks, for example, then I think it's really important that they tell somebody in their school that they're struggling. They tell them, or their parents tell them, or tell a friend, because if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. I think most schools are doing really well about thinking through this proactively, making sure that pupils can see their teacher clearly, can hear their teacher clearly. But if there are any individual concerns that we need to know about, my ask of you would be tell someone about it, and then we can do something about it. Thank you. It's probably worth adding, Russell, just before I finish, that young people who have got special educational needs or disabilities, particular needs, don't actually have to wear masks themselves. I know that's not what the question was getting at, but it is worth flagging that. And if you go onto our local offer website on the council website, you'll see a section on this, and in fact a form that you can download to say that you don't need to wear a face mask. That's very clear in the government guidance. There are some people who are exempt from wearing it in public areas. So again, have a look at the website or get in touch with us and we can help you on that. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Joe, and thanks for directing young people to that website as well. I think that is important, and you're right, it wasn't quite the question, but I still think it's part of that issue there. And it is important that young people are able to communicate clearly at school, and understand what's being said by teachers and so forth. With the face covering situation, I should say. I do notice a lot of teachers who also wear visors as well, like you pointed out. That's clear, which does make it easier, obviously too. Okay, thanks for that. We're going to move on now to the next question, which is around emotional well-being again, actually. So the next question is, do you think the current mental health provisions in schools are combating mental health, and what more can be done to make sure every student is cared for? There's a couple of questions there, really, panel. First of all, what you think the current mental health provisions in school, if they're combating mental health. And the second part is what more could be done to make sure every student is cared for. I think we'll go to Sue on that question first, if that's okay.
Thank you. And I think, again, it's a really key question to ask, because I think everybody's concerned about children and young people's mental health and well-being. And we know from the various surveys that we've done both locally across Hertfordshire and nationally that young people are also worried about their emotional health and well-being and are looking for advice and guidance on where they can get support. So before I forget, in one of the PowerPoint presentation slide earlier on, we talked about Just Talk, which I'll come back to at the end because that's really key to this question. In terms of the specifics around schools, I think there's three things that I'd like to kind of highlight to you. First of all, that we're working behind the scenes really closely with all of our teaching colleagues to ensure that they're really well equipped and trained to be able to support young people in these current circumstances. They've always had ongoing professional training, but we're doing some additional work to really be able to support them so that they can support their students really effectively. I think one of the things that we've said throughout this, and I'm also going to reiterate, which is if you are struggling, it is okay to tell somebody. It's really important whether you tell your friend or somebody in school, because there's always somebody there that will help you, that will also know where to get further help for you. Secondly, we have our school nurses who are also available in every school, and the contact details for them are on that slide, which I know we'll flag up at the end. So you can contact them and have some one-to-one online support sessions as well as some face-to-face sessions. They also run Chat Health, which is a confidential text service that young people have used for a number of years throughout Hertfordshire. And often we just get young people just putting in hello because they're not quite sure what to say to start the conversation. So that's a real important source of support. So schools are working very closely with their school nursing colleagues to ensure that there's additional support outside of a school setting, because we recognise that sometimes young people don't want to tell their teachers for a number of reasons. So school nurses are really vital support there. Every school will have their own pastoral lead, names teacher, who will be developing various support mechanisms that are relevant for each of their local schools so that it works the best for you in your school and setting. I think finally, in terms of Just Talk is a website that we've worked very closely with young people. So you may have in your school a Just Talk ambassador. So Just Talk website is really there to support, it does support professionals, but it will support young people about a range of different sources of support that you can access to help you with your resilience and well-being. There's something called 5 Ways to Wellbeing, which talks about the different ways that you can keep on top of your own mental health through physical activity, to talking to somebody. We're about to launch, so it's very timely, on the 16th of November, a Just Talk week of activities and webinars. So if you go onto the Just Talk website, you'll see Just Talk Week, and that will give you lots of resources that you can use as well. So hopefully that's given you an overview of the different support mechanisms that schools are doing. And clearly the final thing I'd like to say, in case anybody else would like to come in, is that if you are really struggling and you told somebody, we can also signpost you onto some of the children and adolescents mental health services support. So we recognise that some young people are going perhaps beyond just feeling down and anxious, and are perhaps developing more serious mental health worries. We've got some specialists as well that are there to kind of support young people in those particular situations.
That's brilliant, Sue. Lots of information there, and obviously good signposting as well for young people to go to various websites as well that was shown there on the screen. Thank you for that. I just wonder, Joe, if you'd like to comment any further at all on that particular question?
Sure. I mean, just to add a few words to Sue, but I think she covered it off really well. You know, we did our survey over the summer period with young people, asking young people, what are you concerned about during this time? And mental health and emotional well-being was right at the top of the list. It's often quite close to the top of the list, but it really was there. But alongside that, young people told us that a significant number of them said they didn't know where to get help either. So for me, the second part of that question, is there more that we can do? The answer to that is yes, there is more we can do, and there is more that we are doing. Part of that for me is making sure that schools know how to signpost young people, but also have visible ways of just telling young people where to get help. If a young person is struggling and asking help or doesn't quite know who to talk to, you know, just having those signs up or posters or emails, those sorts of things that tell young people, if you're struggling, this is where you can get help. Now, I know that we are currently working with schools, making sure they've got all of this information. It's the point that Sue made. We're rolling out a huge information piece for schools, telling them not only what help's on offer, but getting them to think through how to make that help really accessible to young people so that you can help yourselves. But as Sue said, for those young people who really need some extra help, then there is help on offer. We can support you with that. You need to tell somebody that you need that help. It's fine. Lots of people need help at all different times in their lives, and we'll help you from there. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Jo. And you can see on your screen again the sources of support if you do need that information. The tech service there for Chat Health, Just Talk, and COOF, as our panelists have discussed and explained. Okay, I think we're going to move on to the next question, which is something completely different. That's a great thing about this event, is that we have a wide variety of issues and areas that we've got questions about. And please, folks, keep the questions coming in. There's lots of questions coming in, so thank you for that. So the next question is, in schools, how can we create an environment where we can talk about political issues? So specifically in schools, how can we create an environment where we talk about political issues? Big question. I wonder if we could start maybe locally with Councillor Kingsbury with this question, please.
Of course, thank you. I'm not sure I can comment in much detail in what goes on at in schools at the moment, but I think talking about political issues and creating an environment is sort of, to some extent, we're doing that, maybe not political, but we're having a debate here. It's perhaps looking at some of the things we're doing at this event and getting people talking to each other. And a really key thing is to have understanding and respect for other people, listen to what they say, and perhaps have some debates like this around some political issues, have some talks about it, maybe engage, as David said, with some of the local politicians as well if they want to understand more about what they do. And this is an event, UK Parliament Week, about some of these things as well. So I think it's really that engagement and respect for people and having discussions and treating it, you know, in that sort of respectful way.
Absolutely, and we did obviously touch on that earlier. I think it was David touched earlier about how young people can be more involved politically generally, decision making. So absolutely, I agree. I wondered if we could maybe comment, if Jo has some comments on that, about specifically in schools, how young people can become involved.
Yeah, I mean, there is a whole range of ways. I think many schools are really keen to engage young people in a political conversation, in current affairs, and they're doing it through a range of ways, you know, whether it's youth councils, school councils, those sorts of forums that really create that structure to have that conversation. So I think it's about encouraging and supporting those sorts of initiatives. Many schools work with organisations like the YMCA, but other voluntary sector organisations to sort of bring in that independent organisation that can really help incentivise those sorts of conversations and support young people. I think young people often respond, you know, we respond well to something that feels like it's independent to the school and it's giving us permission to talk. But the other point I'd make is it's something about the school culture. Just shaping that school culture and making sure that it's the sort of culture where leaders are really welcoming an open debate about key issues. And that goes right to the sort of the leadership part of the school. Now, we work really closely with our schools and the leadership in schools to help forge that sort of that culture. And I think, you know, like I said, I think many schools across Hertfordshire we would welcome the opportunity to engage young people in political debate and debate about current affairs. So, you know, if you're listening to this and you would like to have those sorts of conversations in your school, my suggestion would be you tell your leadership team, your school, you tell your head teacher that you want to have those conversations. I think most, if not all, head teachers will be open to it. So you should go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. Good bit of advice there for young people listening to this live or on video. Absolutely, if you want to get involved more, or you want to get involved in something in your school, absolutely, get involved in it, speak to your teachers, because it is a crucial subject for young people. Okay, thank you for that. We're going to move on, panel, to our next question, which is another really significant question that young people, are being asking recently. And it is this: what support is there for young people regarding the unemployment issue that we will inevitably have post COVID-19? So this question is about the support that will be there for young people regarding unemployment. So so trying to get young people in employment post COVID-19, and this question does assume that obviously we'll have that, and we'll make that point. Yeah, big question that we could spend quite a lot of time debating and discussing, I'm sure. I wonder, Jo, staying with you first, of an overview of that question, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there are two ways. I think this is a really important issue. We know that in Hertfordshire, we're going to see job losses. We know that the sorts of sectors and work environments that young people often move into, those around hospitality, events, shops, those sorts of things. The opportunities to move into those just aren't what they were prior to COVID-19. So it's a really good question that you're asking, and it's one that we're really worried about. We're looking at this in the council, I should say, but I think there's a couple of ways of approaching it. One is, how do we provide that support to young people, working with schools and working with YC Hearts and other organisations? How do we make sure we're thinking with young people about the sorts of skills and opportunities they might need to move forward? There's a huge amount of support. I know that YC Hearts, for example, are running lots of groups. I'm sure that Guy will talk about the YMCA and the sort of stuff they're doing. There's lots of individual help on offer. And we're also tracking monitoring and looking for young people who might come out of school and have no job to move into or further training to move into, and we're thinking about how we provide that individual help. But the other thing, which is the broader issue, is how do we really work with our employers across Hertfordshire to offer opportunities, things like internships, traineeships, work experience, as well as jobs. And how do we incentivise that? The government have announced funding, which is available for employers. And I think that what we've got to do, not just in the council, but working with all the organisations across Hertfordshire, what we really need to do is start thinking about how we make the best use of that money that's being brought into the sector as a result of COVID-19. So, if you're a young person and you need to get work experience in a particular sector, how do we incentivise employers to offer those sorts of experiences? That's sort of thinking, those conversations, those bringing people together to think through how to resolve this is happening as we speak. I think there's more we need to do, and we can learn from other areas as well, but it's certainly right at the top of our agenda, not just in the council, but across Hertfordshire. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, Jo, a real significant issue, and thanks for that. I wonder if Guy from 1YMCA, I wonder if you would like to comment any further on that topic.
Sure, thank you. But Jo's really hit the nail on the head. They know that employment is going to suffer, and we know that sadly young people are often at the forefront of that because of the types of roles that they're often just starting in, and hospitality is right there. I guess, yeah, we're all in the situation of trying to work out what we're trying to do. Do look out for apprenticeships. As Jo's mentioned, the government's put money out for that. So there is an incentive for organisations to say, let's get some younger people on board, learning new skills, different bits and pieces. But also I would say that many of the people watching will already have a lot of the skills, particularly in the digital arena, that might make them very attractive to organisations in the future. Also, the young person audience is that one is which many organizations need as customers in the future. And it's great to have you guys as the people who are taking that forward. So I'm expecting there to be a greater degree of jobs within digital marketing, perhaps coding, perhaps within digital influencing. You know, spend a bit more time on YouTube. No one wants to see me on YouTube apart from this one occasion, but, you know, look at becoming a digital influencer or some online retailing or whatever it may be. Actually, I think what we will find is that this time slightly redefines the way that we look at employment, and will be observations that you can make and things that you can do which actually carve out opportunities for yourselves. So it's not all doom and gloom, and there will be a time post-COVID where things get back to something a little bit different. But I think we are all at that phase of going, goodness, what should we do next? I do think the apprenticeship scheme is worth looking up. And I also think looking at some of those digital things where you begin to just look at courses and ways of working with your schools, think about some of those careers which may not be influenced by what's happening at the front face at, you know, retail and high street arrangements. So I'm no career coach, that's not my skill at all. But I do think, as I say, that young people are going to be in that position where they're going to have to think a little bit more innovatively about the way that they're doing. And I bet there are people watching here who've got skills they don't realize that they can unlock and start to use in the future.
Thank you, Guy. And that was a real positive end there about people's skills, because often people do have skills and qualities and stuff that they don't think of. And I think, you know, just taking what you and Joe said there, yeah, absolutely, nail on the head here. We know the job market's going to be affected, particularly for young people who are starting to go into work. But equally, I think you're right in terms of the job market may well change as a result of COVID. And it's about trying to make sure young people are prepared for that. So they've got the skills and experiences to try and combat that, shall we say, and get other jobs, like you suggested, in the digital media sector. Thanks for that panel. Massive issue. We could spend a lot longer talking about that, but we are going to move on because we've got lots more questions. The next question is, do you think the council should do something to support school children who have been denied free school meals during the school holidays? So do you think the council should do something to support school children who have been denied free school meals during school holidays? So let's take a political view on this and go to Councillor Kingsbury first, please.
Thank you for that question. It's obviously a very topical and a very difficult one at the moment. When we talk about council, it obviously depends in terms of which council you mean. I mean, we're probably going to have a question at our council about this, and I know Hertfordshire has been giving funding to help with this, and they've made statements saying that, you know, there is money if people are in difficulty. They can be signposted to look for meals, etc. So it's something no child in Hertfordshire should be suffering with lack of food. And I think we just need to work through what happens over the next few months. Obviously, we've got through half term and we see what happens over the Christmas period. But it is very topical subject and something we do need to look at. But I say, if you look at what Hertfordshire County Council have said, they have had funding and they are making things available for meals for people who need them.
That's brilliant, Councillor Kingsbury. Thank you. Just before, I'm going to come to Joe on this in a minute from a county council perspective. But I just wondered, Sue, in terms of a public health perspective, obviously, you know, Councillor Kingsbury mentioned there about, you know, children, young people maybe going hungry and stuff. There is a public health angle to this as well, isn't there?
I mean, obviously, we all need to have food every day and nutritious food. So clearly that is the priority for us all. And I think Councillor Kingsbury is absolutely right that it is a very important issue and it's something that we're all concerned about. It's not an area in terms of the actual school meals that sits with me, which is why I think Russell suggested that we move on to Joe in a few minutes. But certainly we're doing work and working with many other organisations across the council to make sure that children and young people don't go hungry, and there are lots of local initiatives happening, I know, more broadly than just school free meals.
Thank you, Sue. Let's go over to Joe now, actually. Joe.
Thanks, Russell. A couple of quick points for me. I'll come to the question in a moment, but just to say for young people, because I know that this has been another question has been raised by young people directly with the council. For young people who aren't in school because they might be self-isolating and just can't go to school for a period of time, but who are entitled to free school meals. Schools are still making them available to those young people. And there's a whole range of ways of making sure that those young people can get their school meals, even if they're self-isolating. Schools are coming up with all sorts of ways of delivering or making sure that there's takeaway sandwiches, etc. No child should go hungry. And my suggestion would be, if you are at home and you're not in school, but you're not able to get your school meal that you would normally get, your free school meal, then get your mum, somebody in your house to contact the school and think about how you can get that meal, because schools are making them available. Coming to the specific question about the school holidays, it is a really topical question. I think it's a really good one. I know that it's one that's generating a huge amount of debate. As Councillor Kingsbury said, we're through the half term now. What I can say to you, whilst I can't give you an answer as to what we're going to do when we come to the Christmas holidays, because I know that it's still something that's being debated within the council, what we have said, and Councillor Kingsbury was absolutely right, is if there is anyone out there who needs help over the holidays, who's worried, we are already planning now about what funding we've got for vulnerable families and vulnerable children, and how we can make use of that money in the best way possible. I think nearer the time as we move through the next couple of weeks, we'll probably have some more specifics around that topic. But at the moment, I can't give you a clear answer, because we simply haven't got through that conversation. I think it's a really good question though, and one that it's definitely worth continuing to press. So yeah, let's watch this space.
Thank you, Jo. And yeah, as you said, let's watch this space. It is a very topical thing nationally, isn't it? So yeah, and obviously locally too. Okay, thank you for that. We're going to move on to another question in a minute, but just a reminder, folks. We've had lots of questions submitted. Thank you to everyone who has submitted questions. We've got far too many to answer in the space of time we've got for this event. However, we will try and get the Youth Council to answer them on their Twitter and Instagram over the next 2 or 3 weeks, okay, or next couple of weeks. We are going to finish the event, stop the question time, roughly about 20 minutes time. So we've got 20 minutes roughly of questioning to go, okay, before we start wrapping up, just to give people an indication where we're at with the event, okay? All right, folks, we're going to move on to a completely different question again, variety. What percentage of crime in Welling Hatfield is committed by teenagers, and what are we doing about it? So let's take a local perspective on this first. So the percentage of crime in Welling Hatfield that's committed by teenagers, and what's being done about it. Let's start with Chief Inspector Simon Mason, if that's possible, please.
Hi, Russell. Unfortunately, I can't give you a direct statistic in relation to the percentage of crime committed by teenagers per se. I think generally our crime responses are built again on the information intelligence we have in relation to crime trends, crime patterns. Generally, if there was going to be crime type around our younger generations, it's normally around that lower level antisocial behaviour and how we manage and deal with that. Fundamentally, a lot of that comes back to just an understanding of the consequences of some of these actions, or the impact and effect of some of those antisocial behaviours, and how actually, if we have a young person that's starting to present factors or behaviours that are undesirable generally to society around antisocial behaviour and are impacting the community, I think for us it's about getting in early enough with our partners to make that individual understand the impact they are having, not just on the community, but on their own choices later in life and chances later in life, and working with them and partners to try and divert that behaviour away from perhaps a path from antisocial behaviour that may lead to crime, to make sure that the right support is there at an early opportunity before someone goes too far down a path, and it becomes more difficult to divert away from that sort of behaviour, to actually make sure they understand the support there is out there, the better positive pathways that can be followed. And there's lots of things in Welwyn Hatfield that we do in relation to youth crime or youth antisocial behaviour to make sure that support is there, that direction is there, and that we're working with those partners to identify at an early opportunity those individuals that might be presenting that behaviour, so we can work effectively against it.
Absolutely, Simon. Thank you for that. And it is really important, the point you made there about young people. Sometimes, it's not just them it affects other people, their peers, their families, everybody else. It's the impact coming out, shall we say, from the centre, and how they get involved. Thanks. I wonder if David would like to comment on that question, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. It's one that, unfortunately, in the sort of the format we got tonight, we can't actually hear from those in the audience, if you like, because I think the really shocking fact, although I haven't got the exact figures for Welwyn Hatfield, I'm not even going to guess at them, but the really shocking fact is that most of the crime in the county is committed by people under the age of 25. So, the vast majority of criminals in the county are under the age of 25. Year before last, we had, this year, we've only had 2 homicides to date. So only 2 people have been murdered in the county to date, which is too many, but that's a good figure. Last year, I think the number was 10. And of that, the majority of those were killed by teenagers and were teenagers. So, there are some horrible statistics out there. And in terms of crime which is being committed, it is young people who do the majority of it. That is done for a number of reasons, but actually there are sort of 3 drivers of problems which we're all aware of, I'm sure. Drug and alcohol, mental health issues, and home violence. It's called the sort of the toxic trio, so domestic abuse. And by the way, when we were talking about domestic abuse earlier, the peak in the domestic abuse isn't necessarily what you might first of all think of domestic abuse, although it's still really important to reflect on it. Domestic abuse includes brothers fighting, for instance, familial abuse, as well as what we call intimate abuse. So it's not just partners, it's also what's happening within the home between brothers and sisters, or children and parents, and that sort of abuse as well. And it's worth reflecting on that. So the percentage is relatively high. What we can do, and that's what the really exciting thing, and what I'm starting within the police is something called prevention first, because of course the thing you need to do really, rather than trying to stop people committing a crime again and trying to stop people from saying, I wish I hadn't done that in the first place, it's actually preventing them from doing it in the first place. And that's about ensuring that people get clean in terms of not being dependent on drugs, so that we make sure that people move away from those dependencies and get the right support around that, get the right support around their own mental health, which we've already talked about, so that they don't harm themselves and potentially others, and get the right support around family settings. And that is something which we've all got to do. It's not just a police issue, it's for all of us to do. And there's a common theme there, isn't it? That we've all got our part to play in doing that. So that's really quite an exciting way forward. And I think that although I'm really pleased to be part of that initiative to bring in 20,000 new police officers across the country, I think that's only phase 1. Phase 2 is to ensure that we have the right support for people so that they don't get into those situations, and we actually have that real discussion about what criminal justice means. Because of course, the easy, and I'm not talking seriously here, but the easy way to stop crime, not the way to stop harm, but the way to stop crime is to get rid of crimes. And that's, of course, some people just sort of stop crimes in themselves. Now, clearly that isn't what we do, because the the reason that there are sanctions out there is because people have had harm from something happening to them. We want to stop that harm. But what we need to do is to make sure that society recognises what sort of place we want to live in and actually works up to it. And that's why all of the questions lead to this one, frankly, because all of the questions around things like how do you involve young people in politics, how do you involve young people in keeping themselves safe, all of that leads to this final bit about, well, what is crime like in the area? And in some ways, that's both the starting point and the end point.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. And just before we finish this question, just very quickly go back to Chief Inspector Simon Mason. If young people are concerned about other young people just committing crime, getting involved in crime locally, what should they do? Just very briefly.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, we're always here to be for people to speak to us directly, and obviously our police officers are on the street. But then also, Crime Stoppers is there if people feel they can't speak to us in person, and Fearless as well is another route in to organisations that can then obviously assist and deal with some of these behaviours. And it's really, really important, like you say, that people do feel encouraged, particularly around some of the threats and risks around some of our young people and the world we're living in. It's really important that they are encouraged and do feel that they can report things to us in person or indeed anonymously if they feel that's the only way they can.
And
that's great. Thank you. I just think young people need to know that. Sorry, David.
And if I can cheekily come back in, the one thing everyone can do tonight is make a commitment not to carry a knife ever. If you all made that commitment, because the reason people are bleeding to death on the streets is because they're carrying knives. In fact, a lot of people die with their own knife. You know, that's easy as that. And actually, you are as likely to die if you are stabbed in the thigh as you are if you're stabbed elsewhere on your body. So, you know, people think, oh, it's all right if I stab here, that'll just be something which does it. You know, people are dying out there on the streets, not as much in Hertfordshire as they are just 10 miles away 20 miles away in London, clearly. But actually, you know, if you carry a knife, the likelihood of you being seriously injured or killed is much, much higher. It doesn't make you safer, it makes you less safe. So actually, if everyone on this call tonight and everyone in the county just committed never to carry a knife, that would be a brilliant start. And if after that, everyone committed not to pay people for drugs, you know, so that you don't encourage a trade in drugs on the streets, again, you would be doing so much to make the place safer, because we've got evil people who traffic young girls and traffic young men to carry drugs and to deal drugs, and actually it gives them a life of misery, and they are likely to end up in a really bad place. And if I could only just get one message across, well, I'm a politician, so I don't keep my promises, do I? Two messages across. One is don't carry a knife, and two is don't buy drugs.
Thank you, David, and a very, very useful messages to everybody watching this tonight. Okay, we're going to move on now to the next question, which again is something completely different. And it's this: what can be done to offer more free youth activities over the weekend? So that's what can be done to offer more free youth activities over the weekend. Let's start with Guy on this one from 1YMCA, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Russell. And it is a good question. Funnily enough, we surveyed 2,000 young people earlier in the year from Welwyn Hatfield. And one of those questions was in the region of when would you like to see activities taking place? To backtrack a little bit to some of the previous question, it was really interesting seeing that there were loads and loads of sports of sports activities taking place on Wednesday. And when those finished, it was often that after that point, there'd be a spike in criminal activity and particularly antisocial behaviour, potentially as people were walking home. Really, really interesting to see that. And then we started to see that on some Saturdays as well. So it was great to work with colleagues in the police on that. So there does seem to be a sense of when some young people come out of activities, or maybe a clashing of people coming out of activities that they've been doing which are really positive, actually instead maybe it's throwing a stone or kicking a bin or worse things on the way home. So the question of how do we do more to give young people positive things to do in the trade that's sometimes called a diversionary activity, taking them away from a potentially bored negative thing towards something really positive, is a really good one. And strangely enough, to correct this question and agree with it, it was the weekends that people were asking for. Now, from a YMCA perspective, in Welwyn Hatfield, we're normally trying to deliver somewhere between 4 and 8 sessions per week. And we are starting to look at what that list looks like post-lockdown and whether we can shift some of those to the weekend. Interestingly, there are lots of people who also want activities midweek, a break from school, if you like. So the requests that we've had have been for some more things at the weekend, normally around about the afternoon slot. People are asking for after perhaps sports have happened in the morning, but there are loads of people who don't do sports and actually they still want to come spend time with their friends in a safe place just to have a bit of sociability. And I suspect that as lockdown and any future lockdowns end, we are going to see a real demand for young people saying, I want to get out with some friends, meet some new people, forget all of this isolation stuff. And I think this is going to be on us, on yourselves in YC Hearts and all the agencies working on this to come up with new ideas. But I do think we are looking for people in the Youth Council and young people themselves to tell us, if you run some sessions with this particular topic at this particular time, we will come. And I think that's what we're looking for. So great question. I don't have an instant answer, but I'm hoping other panel members might.
Yeah, it certainly is an interesting question, Guy, from 1YMCA. I wonder if we can go over to Joe, maybe for a holistic answer or response from Children's Services in the County Council, as possible, please.
Sure, and I was just thinking about the question again. I think it's a good question, and particularly that word "free," because a lot of the sports activities that are out there, you know, they're not free, and some of them have actually got quite weighty annual costs, which put barriers for all sorts of families and young people. So that said, I think Guy mentioned YC Hearts. From a council perspective, we've got a range of group activities and sort of individualised support packages on offer, particularly for young people who might need some additional help. So lots of them are sort of targeted around either themes around emotional well-being and confidence building, or targeted at particular groups, for example, young people who might be growing up in care. So we've got a lot of those sorts of things. More broadly, I think it's about how we work with the voluntary sector. I'm looking at Guy, but other organisations across Hertfordshire to think about how can we together sort of enable and mobilise the sort of open access youth activities. I think that the question's getting at. And I know that lots of those conversations are happening in local youth forums and youth groups in all of the districts. And then just, I guess, to reiterate the point I heard Guy make, and I think it's really important, we need to work with young people to hear more about what it is you want to see more of over weekends or indeed after school, if that's also something people want to see more of. So again, just making sure that you make your voice heard, and that you make use of all of the routes within your local area to have your say and to make your mark, and so that we can begin to shape services around that.
That's great, Joe. Thanks very much. Yeah, definitely really important. Young people have things to do, when they want to do them, and it kind of makes sure that their needs are met, so to speak. Shall we say it's something they want to do? Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to move on now, and I'm just about to say this is going to be the last question of the event, and it's this one. My siblings, this has come from a civic young person. My siblings used to have a PCSO for their school, which was so beneficial. Why were they stopped? Surely it's something that needs to be brought back immediately. So this is a young person who's saying that their siblings used to have a PCSO for their school and thought this was very beneficial, was asking us the question, why was this stopped? because surely it's beneficial. Surely this should be brought back immediately. Not sure if that's a question or a comment more. I wonder if we could possibly go to David on this question first, please.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that they were stopped originally was to do with funding. The County Council no longer wished to pay for PCSOs in schools. It couldn't afford to pay for them in schools because it didn't have sufficient funding to do it. I know because I was the person who had to take the decision. So, yeah, I'm blaming myself. But that was some while ago. I'm surprised even the older of the siblings remembered here. It was some while back that PCSOs were in school. It was certainly before I was elected as PCC, and I think we're probably talking about 12 years ago. So some people have got very good memories around that. So I'm pleased to hear that. We are, of course, I've delivered a lot of extra police officers, and there are more to come over the next few years. And one of the things that I'm really open to is to find out whether or not, in terms of where those police officers go, some should go into schools. And I certainly think that PCSOs do a good job. And in my role as PCC, I've encouraged us to keep them. We're one of the few constabularies in the country which is still keeping its full complement of PCSOs. Even if you're just over the border in Cambridgeshire, they're getting rid of all of them. How those are used, I think, is up to the local community to say, because although many people said PCSOs would be good, no schools that I can remember said that they were going to find some funding directly to support PCSOs at the time. So they were probably only seen as nice to have rather than essential, because schools weren't prepared to make any contribution towards them, whilst they could have done. I think it's interesting. Perhaps the more interesting question, again, it's a shame that we can't get into a proper debate about it. The more interesting question is, what is it exactly that those people who said that their siblings thought they were brilliant, what was it that they felt they had through those PCSOs, which they don't feel they now have, because I'm not quite certain what that is. And if there is something missing, I'd be really interested to hear from, perhaps from that person who's asked the question, if they send me a question, that question, and tell me what really they're asking behind it, I'd be really happy to engage with them.
Thank you, David. And I also just think, sort of touching on that point that last point you made, it's about the benefits that PCSOs and what PCSOs can do with and for young people, really, isn't it? And I assume that you would take questions on that at a future date. If young people have views on that, and they've put them through to the Welland Hatfield Youth Council, they could be forwarded to you on that, yeah?
And yeah, indeed, I'd be really happy to respond to that. And just to be clear, I think PCSOs are a really brilliant part of what we do across the constabulary. They're a really valuable part of the police family, and I recognise that there may well be a case for having more PCSOs in schools. Of course, PCSOs are still going into schools, as are police officers, and ideally, I think in terms of patrolling, we should be at a place where people don't sort of see a police car sitting outside of the school and say, gosh, something's gone wrong. They should just say, oh yes, well, that's, it's part of the normal patrol that happens, and that they're in there because they're chatting. Given the fact that we also, I've said that the vast majority of crime is committed by those under the age of 25, it's really quite important that schools are a part of that area, that they need to be able to talk and find out what's going on and just reassure people. So, I think it's really, really important.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. And just before we end with that question, just on a local perspective regarding PCSOs and young people, just don't know if you want to say something, Chief Inspector Simon Mason.
Yeah, if I could, and just to give Mr. Lawson reassurance, as well as the person that's asked the question, Community policing is still very, very important in Hertfordshire, and I'm very pleased and very lucky to be working here where Mr. Lloyd was obviously protecting that community policing for us. Our PCSOs are still going into schools. Our PCSOs are kind of geographically based. They work in communities. It's really, really important that we're not just policing communities. As local policing, we need to be part of the community. And the PCSOs are aware of the communities they're policing, and indeed the schools that they're policing, with youth being a big part of that community. They are still going in schools, they are still engaging them. We're still running really vital projects in schools like Mini Police, which is where we run a scheme with youth over a series of weeks about different things around stranger danger, safety in the community. It is really, really vital that we have strong relationships all of our communities, but particularly our youth, as Mr. Lloyd's highlighted there. And for the person that's asked that question, for some reassurance, yes, we might not have PCSOs in schools all the time, but schools are seen as a really pivotal area of our patrol plans and how we conduct local policing.
That's great. Thank you very much actually for that. It's nice to have a local perspective on it as well. So we've got kind of a Hertfordshire and a local perspective on it. Really useful. Thank you. Unfortunately, folks, we don't have any more time for any more questions, but I would just like to say thank you to those of you that put some questions in. And for those questions that we weren't able to take, please look at the Welland Hatfield Youth Council Twitter and Instagram accounts pages over the next week to couple of weeks, because they will try and put responses to those ones that we haven't managed to get through this evening. I'm very briefly going to hand over to Hannah now.
Thank you so much to everyone who sent in a question. Before the event comes to a close, I and the rest of Welland Hatfield Youth Council would like to hear your views on what our priorities should be for 2020 to 2021.
That's great. Thank you, Hannah. And to do this, we're going to go through this now. So to tell you how you can do this, we do indeed want to hear what you think should be their priorities for Welland Hatfield's Youth Council in the next year or so. So to do this, you need to go to Slido, it's up on your screens now, and send your suggestions on specific topics that you think the Welland Hatfield Youth Council should look at over the next year or so. We're going to give you just a few moments to do that now, I think.
In our next meeting, we will go through your suggestions and have a look at the most popular topics. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at WH Youth Council, where we will be announcing our priorities in the next couple of weeks, and you can follow on what we are up to. If you feel passionate about any of the issues raised today, the Welland Hatfield Youth Council will be perfect for you. We are always open to new members joining. All you have to do is visit www.wellhat.gov.uk/youth council.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. So that's basically us at the end of the event today. All that's left for me to say is thank you to everyone who's made this event possible. I'm sure you'll all agree it's been a really interesting last couple of hours. We've got some really interesting issues, and young people have raised some really interesting questions, which is what this event was about. So I just want to, first of all, thank every young person who attended and submitted a question. I also want to thank the organisers of this event, including those who you haven't seen on screen today that have worked really hard behind the scenes to make sure this event can take place and be successful. I obviously want to thank the Youth Council, who I think you've put on a really brilliant event. I'm sure we'll all agree they've done really, really well to put this event on. And obviously, of course, our panelists, you've all been great at answering the questions and giving your views and asking each other questions sometimes as well. So thank you very, very much. We would really like to get your feedback on today's event, everybody who attended. So if you do want to go to Slido and send us through your thoughts about the event that's just happened, please do so. That would be really, really useful. And it will help the Welwyn Hatfield Youth Council to evaluate the event and move forward in the future.
Thank you.